Hello and welcome to Video Game Hangover. I'm Randy Dickinson, and I'm in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
I'm DJ Ross. I am in Mountain View, California.
Each week on Video Game Hangover, we talk about the games that have been keeping us up at night. This week we're playing Vampire Survivors, Silt, and 20 Minutes Till Dawn.
Ooh.
Plus, we should probably talk about Taco Bell and Star Wars.
Oh, well, you know, just our regular recurring Taco Bell
usual,
and
yeah.
Star Wars segments.
Yeah.
Don't know why you felt the need to remind people that we're just going to talk about those again.
Yep. I feel like for the last couple of weeks, every time we wrap up the episode, I go, oh no, we didn't talk about the Mexican pizza.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. I suspect, I sort of feel like our listeners expect us to talk about the Mexican pizza.
Specifically the Mexican pizza?
Well, it's back.
It was back.
It was, yeah, I guess that's true. It was very briefly back.
True. Are we just going to get into it? We get right into Taco Bell?
Sure.
I can't wish you a happy Captain Picard Day first.
Is that a thing? I didn't know that was a thing.
Oh, it's a thing, according to my calendar.
6/13 is Captain Picard Day.
Oh no, it's the 16th when the show comes out.
Oh, gotcha.
Captain Picard Day, according to some Wikipedia editor, some intrepid Star Trek fan who worked backwards from whatever star date that episode was, and determined that it was on June 16th.
Hmm.
I hope that's still correct. Man, am I going to be embarrassed if I got the wrong day for Captain Picard Day?
You're going to get called out by all of our Star Trek fans.
Yeah.
You'll have to delete your Twitter and apologize.
Oh, man. First I got the Star Wars fans coming for me, now the Star
Right.
Trek fans. What's
DJ
next?
has taken time away from social media to be with his family and engage in some self-reflection. Yeah.
I was called out as a fake Final Fantasy XIV fan over the weekend because I do not use the UI that looks like the classic blue and white menus that they had on the Super Nintendo. So that's just another thing. Just a pariah in all communities now.
That's right. If you're anything like me, I wouldn't want to be a part of any club that would have me as a member. So, yeah. Where were you that you were discussing Final Fantasy XIV UIs with people?
Oh, you know, on the internet.
FinalFantasy.ui.org.net.
Yeah, I'm one of those Final Fantasy XIV news groups.
Yep. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Alt FinalFantasy.fashion.ui.
Yeah, no, you got it. You got it.
Yep.
Wow. I'm surprised. Maybe I've seen you in there.
Yep. I'm sure there's people who take Final Fantasy fashion very seriously.
Oh yeah, that is. Yeah. You have
That's
no
a thing.
idea.
Yeah. I don't know how I ended up on fashion. I think my association with those news groups were I was I came of age in the 90s when Gothic fashion was I guess sort of in its second wave at that point. So my association with news groups was alt.gothic.fashion and alt.gothic.music and stuff like that. So it was
incredible.
Internet message board where you could talk about cool dark music and clothes people.
You were a member of a goth fashion news group?
Shocking.
You posted to it? That's incredible.
I did, yeah. Yep.
I don't think I ever posted to a news group. By the time I got online, really, there were web communities and there was a chat that I would do. Not so much about news groups.
Yeah. That was the only thing that my Yahoo email was good for forever and ever, was subscribing to those posts and getting the updates from my news groups. Yeah.
Mm.
Yep. Man, I have a yahoo.com email address out there somewhere that is probably still flooded with those things. But anyways, we should, the Mexican pizza came back, and DJ and I are big Taco Bell fans, as anybody who's listened to more than one episode of the show knows.
Right.
Did you get to try it It was briefly back, but
I
apparently they've run out of materials.
Got to try it. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I was kind of like not going to, just because like Mexican pizza has not been my go-to Taco Bell order for some time.
Yeah.
But then you mentioned like, oh, I want to talk about it on the show. So I was like, oh, great. I have to do it. And then that same weekend, they're like, oh, no, it's all sold out everywhere. And I just thought, well, am I really just going to go through the trouble of going to a store only to be told that they no longer have these things in stock? But here's what I did. I had a whole plan for this.
Mm-hmm.
I went to a combination Taco Bell / KFC.
Oh.
Because I figured if they don't have the Mexican pizza, I can at least get one of those sandwiches that everybody is talking about. Because I've made it my mission. This is going real off topic. I've made it my mission. There's so much like hype around that Chick-fil-A chicken sandwich, and I don't want to eat at Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
So I'm trying.
So. I support that.
I'm trying to like eat all the other chicken sandwiches so I can like triangulate like what that Chick-fil-A sandwich must be. It's like how they find black holes or like dark matter or whatever. You just have to observe all the other stuff around it. So I was like, oh, this is a good plan. I'll get a good chicken sandwich out of it. And then they ended up having the Mexican pizza anyway. So that was all for naught. But anyway, long story short, I ate one.
Sarah swears by the Popeyes chicken sandwich. I've not had one myself, obviously.
Yeah, obviously. But the Popeyes one is great.
yeah, she's a big fan. We went through a thing during lockdown where she was working from home and I was home because I was unemployed. And she was ordering the chicken sandwich like twice a week. I had to have a intervention. We had to have a conversation about how much Popeyes was too much.
I mean, you could have interventions for worse things than Popeye sandwich.
This is true. There are worse things to be addicted to, but yeah, good sense had to prevail in that situation.
Right.
But yeah, Mexican pizza. So yeah, I got to try it because the if you have the Taco Bell app, they give you access to it like a day early.
This is ridiculous already.
I'm like, well, cool. I've got my pre-order in.
Yeah.
For a copy of the Mexican pizza.
You lined up outside the store at midnight. You get the first one off the assembly line.
I did the virtual lineup. Yeah. So I've not had one of these in a very long time, and I've certainly not had one veganized, and I don't recommend it. It's not great.
Oh, wow.
It's the two crispy little shells with their refried beans in between and the sad pizza sauce on top and some tomatoes. And for this, you get the privilege of paying $5.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a little underwhelming. I think the last time I had one, I probably still ate meat and cheese. So it's been a while. And that's probably not that I would encourage anybody to eat meat or cheese, but that's probably the version of this you should be consuming.
Mm-hmm. So what does a vegan one consist of? So you got black beans instead of the meat, probably.
No, it's just the refried beans.
Oh.
Refried
man,
beans
I really don't know my
shells.
Mexican pizza anatomy, I suppose. And there's no cheese on it then.
Correct. Yeah.
So it's just kind of a weird refried bean tostada sandwich.
Correct. Yeah. It's a tostada with a lid. Yeah. I was super excited because it was all over the internet and the app kept hyping it. And I was like, cool, I'm going to get it 2 days before anybody else. And I'll post it on Twitter and I will be, the envy of all of my friends on the internet for a day. And I opened up my little lidded box and it was just sad. It just looked not good. And I thought, well, maybe they've not made one in a long time. Maybe they're rusty.
Out of practice.
They're out of practice. And it just tasted sad. It didn't have a happy taste at all. The shells weren't quite the same. They didn't have kind of that like sharp, like nacho break to them. They were more soft, I thought. And I'm like, maybe it's just not good. So I had it like a day later again. And it was still
second opinion.
Second opinion. It's still not good. So maybe I just don't like the Mexican pizza anymore.
It's not my favorite. I mean, like I didn't dislike it. The thing with the Mexican pizza, though, is you have to eat it in the store. That's why I went through this whole ordeal, dragging myself out to a store and going inside. Because I've gotten them through the drive-thru before, and by the time it's all assembled, you get it home or into the parking lot or wherever you're eating this thing. It's like a soup. You really need that kind of crunchy tostada shell.
Yeah. I ate mine in the parking lot. I eat all Taco Bell in the parking lot. I don't ever take it home.
Oh, man.
I don't think I've ever had Taco Bell in my home.
No Taco Bell in this house.
It doesn't. In this house, we don't eat Taco Bell.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't make it home. I think it's probably 3 or 4 miles between me and the nearest Taco Bell, and it never quite makes it back to the house.
Oh, that's why you gotta strategize. You can't. You gotta know which items are gonna make the trip. And generally, it's not the Mexican pizza.
Right. But I'm saying that my situation was specific to eating it in the parking lot shortly after it being prepared, and it did not. It did not sit around for a long time, so it was. It was not a victim of turning into soup.
All right. Well, it's too bad.
Yeah. So, I mean, which is by the by because it's not really available anymore anyway. They appear to have run out of pieces, and they're saying it'll be back this fall, but I think I'm done. I think
fall?
I've had my little Mexican pizza adventure, and I don't need it anymore.
Well, I thought the intention was that it would be a permanent item once again.
I think that was probably the intent as well, but it seems to have. There was something on alt.tacobell.net. No, there was something on r/Taco Bell on Reddit that somebody leaked saying it was like all these lines of if customers are angry about the pizza being gone, here's what you can tell them. And that essentially it outsold expectations. They anticipated having enough materials to be able to keep it on the menu permanently, but they were having trouble at this point sourcing more, and it would not be back until the fall.
God, imagine getting that worked up at a Taco Bell because they don't have your item.
People lose their mind in drive-thrus all the time. Every week there's a story of somebody who got angry and tried to crawl in the drive-thru window.
Well, no, I'm sure that happens all the time.
What was the thing with the Szechuan sauce and Rick and Morty? People are nuts at fast food restaurants. It's garbage food. Just calm down. Yeah.
But I've been in the drive-thru and learned that the items I was after have been permanently canceled, not just they ran out. It's oh, you'll never get to have that again. And I was oh, no. And then 5 seconds later, I was okay, I'll just get something else on the menu. It's the exact same thing anyway.
Yeah. I mean, everything at Taco Bell is beans, rice, cheese.
Yes.
In some various form. So, yeah, it's not too hard of a flex to find those exact things in some other format.
If you're in the drive-thru already, you should understand that.
So all of that withstanding, I'm back to my normal Taco Bell order. I ventured out, I mixed it up. I was underwhelmed, so I just go back to the thing that I always get.
All right, which is
2 spicy potato soft tacos fresco style and a bean burrito fresco style.
Sounds good.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's not the most adventurous, but it's vegan. And it's one of the few places I can go through a drive-thru and order a vegan meal, and provided they don't screw it up and put giant globs of weird cheese on it, it's satisfying. And there's a Taco Bell everywhere, so no matter where I travel through the suburbs and beyond suburbs of Pennsylvania, inevitably there is a Taco Bell somewhere where I can get something that will sustain me at least until I get back to civilization.
Yeah. I've been really into the black bean crunch wrap lately. I have to say, though, ever since they discontinued the double-decker taco, I just feel like I'm not welcome at Taco Bell. Because that was my thing.
We don't serve your kind here.
Yeah, and I was what am I going to do? What can I order that's similar to that? There's not really anything. You get a weird cheese-stuffed chalupa or whatever. I'm that's not the same thing.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I found some solace in this, the crunch wrap. But there are definitely weeks when I just question why I'm going to the drive-thru again. Yeah.
I like that crunch wrap. I've had that a couple times. That's good.
Yeah.
And also very easy to veganize.
Yeah. Also pretty sturdy. Tends to survive the trip home. So that
travels well. Yeah. Yeah. A good handheld solution if you're trying to drive a vehicle and eat at the same time.
Yeah.
Yep.
A genius of taco engineering. Genius feat, rather. Not the crunch wrap itself. I'm not sure if it is it's sentient or not.
Have you had the breakfast one that has the hash browns and
that
stuff?
That I wasn't a huge fan of.
No, really? Okay. The breakfast at Taco Bell is sadly not veganizable. There's really no way around it. Something has eggs or bacon in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But once lunch comes, I'm in.
Yeah.
So yeah. I've done the thing that I've wanted to do for weeks now, which is talk about the Mexican pizza, and it is underwhelming.
Well, that's disappointing. That was not how I expected it to go. I thought you were a huge fan of this thing.
Yeah. No. I mean, I'm no more a fan than the things that I've been ordering all along. And like when the potatoes went away, that was heartbreaking, because that is like 90% of my options at Taco Bell include those little crispy potatoes.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So those were dark days, but now that the potatoes are back, and when they came back, they were fine. They were delicious. They weren't weird. They weren't underwhelming. They weren't, oh, these are not as good as I remember them. They were great. So as long as those stick around and those don't have any supply chain issues, Taco Bell and I are still friends.
Well, good.
Yeah. Should we also talk about Star Wars at this point?
Oh yeah. Well, got yet another angry Star Wars viewer mail. Since that's just a thing. It's actually not angry. I'm just saying.
No, not at all.
Because yeah. I've been waiting for that angry Star Wars viewer mail. But no, I got a little note from Green Captain on Twitter, friend of the show.
Yeah.
In response to, I guess we just talked about Star Wars again last week. But he says, if you're watching Obi-Wan and are interested in where the Inquisitors come from, oh, this is why, because I was talking about the Inquisitors in that Jedi game, and also in Star Wars Obi-Wan. Anyway, he says, I highly encourage you to watch the 4 seasons of the animated show Rebels. In my opinion, it's the best example of Star Wars since the original trilogy.
Wow.
Rebels is the origin point of a lot of things that are showing up in the live-action TV shows. It tells its own story and doesn't rely on years of other things to get its points across, so highly recommended. Also, Randy might enjoy it.
Oh.
Well, hey, that's shocking.
That can't be true, because I don't enjoy anything.
Right. Not even the Mexican pizza.
Not even the Mexican pizza. No. It's interesting. I don't know if I have the bandwidth for a Star Wars TV series. But I look for things that like are sort of low investment in sort of popular culture. So like I there's the WandaVision. I was just like, that looks cool. Like I posted on Twitter, like, this looks like a weirdo take on a Marvel thing. Do I need to know tons of Marvel lore to sort of get it? And the consensus on the internet from Twitter anyways was like, yeah, you probably, there's a little bit of baggage there. That if you don't have like Marvel knowledge, you probably would not understand quite what's going on in WandaVision, or at least who some of these characters are. So yeah, it's hard for me with Star Wars to like find a place where I can enter without having seen much of any of it for the last 30 years. It's interesting that this is out there, and it's animated, which is kind of cool. I know people like the Clone Wars animated ones. Yeah.
So here's the thing. Do I have to watch Clone Wars before I watch Rebels? Is that the correct order? Can I just go directly to Rebels? I have a problem here.
Green Captain specifically says Rebels doesn't rely on years of other things to get its points across. So
okay, well, I guess
maybe you're safe, like me, just sort of venturing into this.
Well, I'll check it out. I was so fascinated by the Inquisitors in Obi-Wan because I thought they were from this video game, but apparently they're from this cartoon. Could you call it a cartoon? It's animated, right?
I don't think we say cartoons anymore.
Oh man. Oh well.
Yeah. The C word. No, that's the other word.
I haven't seen that show.
The Inquisitors are the sister, right? Third sister and ninth sister and stuff like that. Okay.
One's in black with a weird lightsaber that's got like a frisbee on it.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. They're kind of cool in the Jedi game, which I've continued to play. There's a female one who has kind of an interesting and cool reveal kind of halfway through the game where I was like, didn't see that coming. And then she gets very chatty and tells you all kinds of things and taps into your little headset.
Yeah, well, then she just starts talking about Star Wars stuff.
You're like, just talk about Star Wars stuff. We're like, oh, you should just quit while you're ahead. I don't need all of this baggage. But yeah, no, it's they're cool characters. I like their look. I mean, everything in the on the Imperial forces is very has a very like 1930s German thing that is probably not okay to find fashionable, but yeah, it kind of works. I think it's kind of has a look.
Yeah, and everything. They've got some real good designers working on that show or the game, and it's all over the Star Wars
in that universe,
or whatever. The reason I thought it was so interesting that they had these Inquisitors in two places, though, my understanding was that they used to keep sort of the main trilogy, or like the movies, kind of separate from whatever was going on in other Star Wars media. So there were like, these novels and video games and comics and things. And I think at one point they like did away with a lot of that. And so what it seems like is happening now is they have more freedom to just like introduce concepts outside of the movies. So I thought it was interesting, like, oh, they're just using something from the video game in this other thing, but no, that had actually come from another thing, which I believe Rebels predated the Fallen Order game, but at this point I'm not totally sure.
Yeah. And it's certainly not one of like the main trilogy or the new trilogy or the whatever.
Yeah.
It's it's definitely some other piece of entertainment, but it all kind of ties back together.
Yeah.
Somebody is doing some big work ensuring that there is some sort of like universal continuity between all of these things.
Well, yeah, I mean, everything now has to have it has to like stand up to the MCU or whatever. It has to be consistent across everything. So on some level, it's kind of interesting that, it feels like these smaller sort of side properties are like a little more legitimized by having their concepts reused elsewhere.
Yeah. I don't know. It seems like there's a little more, and again, weird sort of outsider, like casual observation of these things, a little more experimentation maybe in the Marvel universe.
Mm-hmm.
At least as far as sort of like Legion goes, because Legion, the first 7 or 8 episodes of that TV show, you would never know it's connected to the Marvel universe in any way, except for the Marvel logo that pops up in the opening credits.
Mm-hmm.
You get further into it and it starts to turn into like an X-Men origin story, but it's very like nobody puts on a leotard or a leather suit at all. Nobody puts up their hand and like does little like amazing powers. It's all of these people who are like, in an insane asylum because the world thinks they're nuts. But they're actually mutants. And if, in a world where people had sort of mutant abilities, you would probably think they're crazy too. So yeah, it's good. It's really, really well done. And it has no, Iron Man doesn't swoop in at any point. So it really kind of stands as its own thing. And it's a very alternate take on, the origin of the X-Men.
Save the Iron Man cameo for the post-credit scene.
No, please no. Let me have my one thing.
You gotta tie it back in eventually.
But it does feel like there are little safe havens, little nuggets of other in the Marvel universe that don't quite happen in Star Wars. Like there's a lot of work that goes, like we said, into sort of making all of that Star Wars stuff kind of like feed into each other in some way, shape, or fashion. Mm-hmm. Whereas with Marvel, and I can't think of a ton, Legion maybe, that Logan movie, I mean, certainly it was, what's his name? That actor who played Wolverine.
Oh man, I was just gonna wait to see how long it took. So it was just like, pull out any of these names.
Yeah. What is that actor's name though?
Hugh Jackman.
Hugh Jackman,
also known as Huge Action.
But I saw Logan, and I don't know that whole thing, and I liked it. Like I thought it stood alone as its own sort of like unusual take and sort of like depiction of a thing from the Marvel universe.
Yeah, that happened from time to time.
Yeah.
If anything, I'm just kind of disappointed that they are putting such emphasis on everything being tied into the MCU, because it feels like you lose opportunities to have, just side stuff like Logan, which is, it's not checking all the boxes on their consistency style guides or whatever.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. And I mean, there are certainly, other unified universes of fandoms out there, but those seem to be kind of the two most unavoidable.
Yeah, sure.
So cool. Thanks to Green Captain for the recommendation. If we check out Rebels, we'll let you know.
Yeah. If you check out Rebels, definitely let me know. So make sure I'm sitting down first.
Yeah. Well, let me get through this Jedi Fallen Order thing and
see how much more Star Wars you can handle at that point.
Yeah. When I finished Guardians of the Galaxy, I was sort of like, what else is out there? How much more Guardians things can I dig up? Because I was sort of into them.
Yeah.
I started doing some research and stuff like that. And I remember the Howard the Duck movie from back in the day, and Howard the Duck has some connection to Guardians of the Galaxy. So I was,
Don't tell me you went from the game to watching Howard the Duck.
No, I still have not. I've not seen Howard the Duck since I was a little kid. I suspect that movie does not hold up. I mean, I don't know if it was good when I was a kid either, but I was a kid, so I had, just watching the universe through different eyes. But yeah, after I finished the Guardians of the Galaxy game, so enamored with it and these characters that I did, start reading up on, what else is connected to Guardians of the Galaxy? Do Guardians of the Galaxy connect to other sort of Marvel things that I should know about? Not really. It's not a ton of that. No. But yeah, I was, I left the Guardians game a bigger fan of Guardians than I was prepared to be. I don't know if Jedi will have that effect on me. The video game, anytime anybody starts sort of talking Star Wars language, I'm like, I don't care about this. You're not winning me over with it. Yep. And it's a lot. It's a lot of like, just talk about Star Wars things.
Yeah. I like the less dialogue in general, the better.
Yeah. Yep. I just want cool new upgrades. I have a cool new upgrade now. I'm playing the Jedi Fallen Order, and anytime he's running and people are shooting at him, he does a cool thing with the lightsaber where he swings it around and shoots all the beams back at people. So I just run everywhere now.
Yeah. It's great. Yep.
It's a good time.
All right. But yeah. Well,
so that is your Star Wars minute. That was slightly more than a minute, but
yeah. I was going to say, now that we're like half an hour into this, should we talk about, I guess we're talking about the Star Wars game, so that's fine.
Yeah. But Silt and Vampire Survivors and 20 Minutes Till Dawn. Are you going to do like a vampire double feature? Maybe I should do Silt and get it out of the way.
I don't know. I wanted to talk about 20 Minutes Till Dawn, which is a Vampire Survivors like, but I feel like I can't talk about it until I talk a little bit about Vampire Survivors. Also, it's been a while since I talked about Vampire Survivors. That game has changed quite a bit since I first discussed it a few months ago. But what is Silt? Should we talk about Silt? How does that have a lot of vampires in it?
It has.
That's just like dirt, right? Why are we talking about that?
It is. Silt is just like dirt. Yeah. Not the video game Dirt, which is a racing game.
Oh, yeah, that's right. God, the sequel to Dirt. It's like a boating game.
Right. No, that's not true at all. So in Silt, this is one of those games sort of like Limbo or like Inside or Far Lone Sails, where you move from left to right. It's kind of a moody environment, and you're trying to sort of like escape from things or run away from things or solve some little puzzles and stuff.
Oh, this is okay. Yeah, I remember this game. This is the one with the scary mouth monster.
Correct. Yeah, that's true. So in Silt, you're a diver. So instead of you running left to right, you occupy from the beginning the diving suit of a mysterious shadowy figure, who is sort of trapped underwater somehow. And as if that's not horrific enough, the world underwater is just a nightmare. Like toothy hellmouths and mysterious leeches and things that want to eat you and stuff like that. But you have a weird little defense mechanism that you can sort of possess any other living creature. So you swim around and you find, weird little fish or a shark or a crab or things that are amalgams of mysterious underwater sea creatures that don't exist in the real world. And you can take them over and you have control over them and they have different abilities. So if if you get chained up or if there are vines in the way, you can possess a little piranha and he can chomp through all the little vines and stuff like that.
You don't like leave your suit as this is happening? You stay in the suit?
It's like there's like this beam that sort of like snakes out of your head. Okay. This beam of light, and you sort of like connect it to some other like living thing, and it then takes that thing over. You have to be careful though, because your body's super vulnerable while that happens, while you're having this out of body experience. You could also be eaten by all of the piranha's little friends. So you've got to find a place in the environment where you can sort of hide, so that you can kind of possess these critters to sort of solve little puzzles and, resolve little access issues and stuff like that. There's some weirdo bizarro stuff that happens where you find this mysterious tree that has strange critters sort of living in the branches of it, growing under the ocean. And you have to, you sort of piece together that you have to feed the critters living in the tree for something to happen. So they look like birds, but they can't be birds because it's under the ocean. So you're trying to figure out like, what do they want to eat? What do you feed them? Because they have these like gaping mouths that, you're left to intuit and need to be fed. So you find, you sort of use yourself as sacrifice. You find these little like sucker eel-like things that attach to the front of your face. And you try to swim with these things attached to you over to one of the bird mouth things, and it eats it off of your face. And it's kind of horrifying and weird. But it is one of many.
A diving suit?
You are wearing a diving suit. Sort of attaches sort of like to the front of your diving mask.
Oh, okay. Well, that's not that bad.
Yeah. But you can sort of like, I'm playing on the Switch, and you can sort of feel it fighting against you. You can feel like it sort of shakes.
Oh, got that HD rumble going.
Yeah, and it pulls against your normal swimming speed. So you're left with the impression that like, well, I better get this thing off my face as quickly as possible. So when you feed all the birds in the tree, something mysterious happens, and another giant creature emerges, and you have to solve a series of puzzles to get around it. And you're sort of like trying to figure out like, where am I? Why am I trapped underwater? There's this weird sort of like mechanical thing that happens. There's like an underwater temple with like powered machines inside of it. No dialogue throughout this whole thing. No like, audioed logs or anything like that. It's just some art designer had a very vivid nightmare vision of what underwater should look like, and created all these strange creatures and puzzles that sort of like dovetail into each other. It's sort of satisfying. I'm having a good time with it because it's so bizarro. It's so unusual and weird. I still don't, in general, like swimming or underwater type things in any video game. I feel it's generally never fun. And here, I'm left to sort of like intuit that geez, being under the ocean is just a nightmare. It's just horrifying. Everything wants to eat you or suck your blood or whatever. But yeah, at least it's sort of done in a way that is, a creative kind of artsy representation. And it has that sort of limbo or inside look where everything's kind of shadowy and mysterious. So the things you're imagining are probably much, much worse than the actual sort of detail of what it would look like if it was in vivid color.
I don't know. Sometimes that's enough. Like the whole premise already just sounds so unpleasant. Yeah.
It's fun. It's brief. It's certainly not like a 20-hour opus. It's 4 hours and you're in and out and done with this thing. It's a little bit of trial and error to it, which can be a little frustrating sometimes because it's not the most generous with checkpoints. So you'll get like, say, for example, the tree thing where there are like 4 bird-like creatures in the tree that you're trying to feed. And if you screw up when you're feeding the third one, you have to go back and start over and feed them all over again. And so, yeah, there's a couple little sort of like progression things that could be sort of resolved with a little more thoughtful placement of checkpoints. But the game doesn't sort of come that way. If you screw up a piece of a bigger puzzle, you have to start the whole puzzle over again. So it can be a little frustrating for a game that sort of relies so heavily on trial and error. But other than that, I found it kind of fun. It was dark and mysterious, and it kind of pushed all the right buttons.
How does it stack up against like Limbo Inside?
It definitely sort of feels like inspired by Limbo, inspired by Outside. I don't think it necessarily does anything to sort of rival those games. Inside, we've talked about quite a bit on the show, is just feels like such a perfect video game experience. I love every weird decision that is made in that video game. And Silt very much feels sort of like, oh, hey, if you'd like that game, here's this game. Like in the early minutes of Silt, you possess your first fish and you sort of use his ability to solve a little puzzle. And then it really is just that over and over and over again through the next 3 hours and 45 minutes.
Are they like the different fish throughout the game, or? Yeah,
different fish, all with different abilities, but with some sort of very clearly telegraphed sort of puzzle that you're trying to resolve.
Okay, interesting.
There's a fish that has it looks like a big hulking kind of like a shark type thing, but it has like let's say a hammerhead. It's not a hammerhead shark, but it has like a big like protrusion on its skull. And you can possess it and take it over and sort of charge up its sort of swim speed so that it runs into things and shatters them and clears a path for you to get through.
All right.
So again,
it's starting to sound like a Kirby game.
Oh, it is a little bit like a Kirby game, actually. You put it in those terms. Much less pink than a Kirby game, but yeah. But yeah, you sort of get it, right? I mean, you kind of you do one thing in the first few minutes, and then you do that thing over and over and over again with slightly different results. And part of sort of the fun of the exploration is sort of taking over a new fish and going, what's this one's ability? What can it do? How can it help me? But inevitably, you'll be faced with some barricade, and nearby is a fish that you have to take over, and it does a thing that sort of resolves that for you. Mm-hmm. So it's not a lot of like piecing it together in complex ways. It is fairly, I guess, linear in that way, and it's thinking anyways. Whereas Outside was so surprising and so unusual and made some very mysterious and strange choices where I was sort of like, what is even happening in this video game right now? There's nothing in Silt, other than it's just a weird, mysterious kind of design and that whole underwater machine thing and stuff like that. Yeah, that really ever feels like a greater mystery, like a strange universe or anything like that.
I don't really know what I expect from. Yeah, no, it made sense. I was just thinking.
You got real quiet, and I was like, maybe I'm not making my point.
Well, I was just trying to think. Like, it seems like there's so many of these games coming out that there's such an obvious connection back to Limbo or Inside, and it makes me wonder, like, oh, were there just always games like this, or is everybody still just kind of aping those two? Or not like in a negative way, but it seems like it's made quite an impression on a lot of developers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm just wondering, like, okay, well, so what sort of sets them apart from each other? Like, this one's underwater, this one you're on a train or a boat or whatever those the Lone Sails games were about. Or sort of the Far games are about. They definitely need a new title for those things.
Yeah. I would say the Little Nightmares games are probably evocative of those two, I think.
Yeah.
Those go in a purely kind of horror direction.
Yeah, it's interesting they all kind of go the horror route as well.
Yeah.
Like, you never actually get Kirby in one of these. He's just like, I'm just very cheerful and pink and solving puzzles.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think, there's a couple different things that you're aping, right? So if you're going sort of limbo forward, it's the aesthetic in a lot of ways, right? It's dark and shadowy, just mysterious outlines, things sort of hidden in shadows. Inside did a lot of that, sort of things hidden in the dark. Little Nightmares does a lot of that too. But yeah, I mean, if it's sort of like bright neon Technicolor, it's really just a platformer, right? So you're not. Yeah, I think the place where sort of Inside or Limbo are most evocative is in its sort of aesthetic, because otherwise it's just Mario in a lot of ways, right?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
This actually just reminded me that last week they revealed. Actually, they didn't reveal. They just reminded everybody that they're making a sequel to Flashback, which is an old kind of puzzle platformer from like early 90s.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, like, maybe that's you could probably consider that a predecessor to Limbo and these kind of games in a certain way, although it's quite different from, you're not just running from left to right and solving puzzles necessarily. But yeah, I'm really curious how that's going to end up, because, well, the original is like one of my favorite games of all time. The kind of reboot that they did a few years ago, I felt totally missed the mark. But I don't know. It would be interesting if it took some cues from something like Inside. But I think even though this is the second time they showed it off, they showed very little of what the actual game looks like. And a lot of it seemed very like obfuscated on the screen. So I don't know. Confidence is not incredibly high around that one.
Yeah. I mean, that would certainly be in a more sort of like sci-fi vein, right? I mean, that comes from the era of like Out of This World and Flashback and
Out of This World, exactly.
You could probably draw a line between those and Outside and Limbo pretty easily, and then further on you go to things like the Far games, Lone Sails, and whatever the other one was called. And those aren't necessarily scary or spooky. I think there are elements of it that are very sort of isolated and kind of creepy feeling, but they're not horror games, really.
No.
Yeah. Not sure what my point is, but Silt is very much from the Inside and Limbo school of how to make a video game. And certainly pushes a lot of the same buttons, I think. So yeah, if any of this sounds interesting to you, if you like a creepy underwater, little bit of a mystery to solve and some puzzles to get through and mysterious creatures to sort of try to avoid getting eaten by. Would recommend checking out Silt. It's on the Switch.
I mean, as much as I like a game like this, I do not need to play one where it's just giant fish trying to eat me. Maybe there's something on that Wholesome Direct. Maybe they've got their own version of one of these where you're just being chased by like cupcakes or like little cats or something.
Yeah. I've not played that game. I'm not sure. Yeah. If that was from the makers of who made the Inside? Play Dead. It'd be like cupcakes are chasing you, but then they turn into a giant hellmouth that consumes your soul.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it would end horribly.
Yep.
Maybe that'll be my mission. I've got to find one of these that's like not just terrifying. Let's see if it's any good.
Talk to me about Vampire Survivors and 20 Minutes Till Dawn.
Yeah.
Do you only play vampire games now, or is this a recent thing?
I don't think 20 Minutes Till Dawn is about vampires. Well,
no?
Yeah, it might be. I honestly, it's like, well, I'll get into it.
I saw the trailer for it, and that was absolutely the impression I got. But
okay, no, I didn't watch the trailer, but I was just thinking because there was like a whole cast of characters you can unlock, and I was just trying to remember, like, I think one of them did have fangs, and like a few of them have red capes, so I guess I can't rule out the possibility that they might be vampires. But anyway, Vampire Survivors also not really about vampires. You play as like it's like a Castlevania knockoff cast. I talked about this before. This is I don't know what they're calling this still. It's like a reverse sort of side-scrolling shooter where or a reverse bullet hell. That's what they call it. Where there are just tons of enemies swarming at you, and you keep picking up weapon upgrades that turn you into just this fountain of like bullets and knives and other weird sort of arcane power-ups. And it's really interesting because you don't actually shoot at them. You just kind of steer your guy around the screen, and it generally aims automatically, or it'll like fire off projectiles in the direction that you're moving or facing or stuff like that. So you have some limited amount of control over what's happening, although not as much as if you're playing a true twin-stick shooter. But this game is amazing, though. It's basically a roguelike. And sorry, I'm just doing my quick recap on everything that I went over the last time I talked about this. And that you collect all these power-ups, and you really just feel like at any moment, at least once the game gets going, you're kind of on the brink of ruin, where you're just getting swarmed by all these enemies, and it kind of goes up and down. You'll feel like incredibly powerful at some points, and then suddenly there'll be this even larger enemy swarm than like one you've ever seen before. And it's like, oh, how am I going to deal with this? And then the next time you just pick up a ton more power-ups, so you gain a few more levels, and you're just strong enough to deal with this next wave of enemies, and it just repeats like that for like 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. This game is in early access, so they keep putting out new updates for it. I guess, it's not necessarily a given with early access games, but this developer has been very good about updating it. It feels like every few weeks at this point, there's a new update that comes out.
Cool. This was the one that was like a very humble like initial price, like $5 or something like that, right?
Yeah, in fact, it's still $3. I think
$3.
It would be unpopular, but he should bump this thing up because just leaving so much money on the table. And it seems like this game is just incredibly popular still. I feel like people wouldn't begrudge him if he like moved it up to $5 or even $10 on the Steam store. But that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah. You definitely get the impression that, one, because it's kind of everywhere right now, he sold a few copies, and that money is definitely going back into development.
Yeah.
He's not driving around in an Aston Martin while Vampire Survivors is begging to be updated.
But he could be. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how the economics of the whole thing worked. But just think, even if he was charging double, it'd still only be $6.
Yeah. Which is a very reasonable price for a video game.
Oh, yeah. Especially, like, I've played this one so much at this point. It's out of control. But anyway, there's this new update that came out in this last week. It feels to me like one of the more substantial updates that I've seen since I started playing the game. Most notably, they added some new sprites all over the place. So they originally they started out with kind of this like Castlevania knockoff sprite pack where you would load it up and just be like, oh, that's just Skeleton from Castlevania, or that's, this other specific character that somebody like very slightly edited over and put in the sprite pack that I guess the developer just kind of picked at random. I don't know how he actually settled on it. But it was just fun to see them moving closer towards having like their own unique assets for everything. Like the sprites are not even that much of a departure from the old Castlevania stuff, but a lot of it is like, oh, okay, this is definitely like, this is no longer the exact knife or like Bible or holy water that you would pick up in Castlevania. It's kind of the Vampire Survivors flavor of it. So that's good. I expect to see a lot more of that as they move towards the final release, or at least getting out of early access.
Excellent.
They also just added a whole bunch of other new stuff that kind of feeds into the weird like meta game around this thing, which I didn't talk about the last time because I wasn't that far. I wasn't that deep into it. At that point, I was still just playing this goofy kind of twin stick shooter and enjoying like the mayhem that ensues when you pick up all these like weapon upgrades and everything. But it turns out as you continue to play this, you realize there is just a whole lot of other sort of like meta missions that you can take on as you're playing this. Like you have a whole range of characters and weapons and upgrades you can buy, but you're rewarded for like reaching certain milestones with some of these characters or upgrading weapons in a specific way, which is really interesting and has kind of changed how I approach each sort of run in this game. So each run you have a limited number of weapons and sort of artifact slots. I forget what they call the second one actually, but basically you have a limited number of equipment slots. And every time you level up, you are given a choice of 3 items. Some of them, like they could be either weapons or these artifacts. And the way it kind of works is you pick a weapon, and each weapon has a corresponding artifact that goes along with it. And as you keep leveling up and upgrading these weapons, if you have the correct artifact and you fully upgrade your weapon, you will eventually unlock like the evolved form of that weapon.
Oh.
And the evolved form is usually just like, it's just a quantum leap beyond whatever the weapon was before. So like, I like the sort of straightforward knife or dagger weapon, which just shoots out a little dagger in front of you. And as you pick up more of them, it'll like shoot more daggers, it'll shoot them faster, or the cooldown will be reduced. But once it's evolved, it just turns into like a dagger machine gun. So it's just wherever direction you're moving in, there's just a hailstorm of daggers shooting out in front of you. It's like absurd. And so there's one of these evolutions for like every single weapon.
That's kind of fun.
Yeah, so it kind of becomes more or less about like, oh, just let me get as many weapons as possible and let me get any of these artifacts that happen to drop in front of me. And you start sort of chasing these specific pairings because, maybe you really like a weapon, maybe you don't necessarily like the artifact that it pairs with, but because there's that pairing, if you upgrade both of them, or you upgrade the weapon anyway, you're going to get this awesome evolved form of it later on. And so I start each of these runs now with sort of a build in mind where I just look at what weapon my character starts with. And I go, okay, so that means I need this specific artifact, and along the way I'm going to try and pick up like these weapons and these artifacts to go with them. And sort of on top of this is, as you are clearing levels, or as you're like surviving for longer and longer and evolving specific weapons, you just unlock more stuff like new characters and new weapon evolutions and new stages. And then along with that comes even more of these weird like meta goals. So it's like survive 30 minutes on this stage or evolve this one specific weapon. And in this update, they've added a couple new weapons, which are just much more involved to be able to evolve them than the previous ones. Like I think a couple of them take up multiple slots in your inventory. So it's just much more of a challenge. You have to be much more thoughtful about which, how you're outfitting your build.
Mm-hmm.
So I was diving back into this weekend because I've heard this update came out and just struggling to get through these levels. and upgrade the new weapons, because I'm like, well, what happens after that? I just unlock a new thing that you can then take into the next game you play. And like, what is that going to unlock? What is the next thing I evolve going to get me?
It unlocks more unlocks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And each of these stages, it seems like they started out pretty straightforward with these stages where it was mostly the tile set or the aesthetic that would change. But the later ones will have little gimmicks, like little mine carts you can push to ram into enemies and all that. And some of them will have little secret like passageway or something. I ended up playing this one stage where at the end of it, I think it was at the end of it, but I was like, had a reasonable expectation of how the level was going. And suddenly I just found myself in this completely different area where all the enemies behave differently. I was like, okay, this is, I don't know what's going on with this game anymore. This is turning into a cookie clicker scenario where there's like, I started out baking cookies, and now we're talking about like demonic grandmas invading the Earth realm or whatever. So it looks like this is just going to continue as he keeps adding these updates. It's just going to get weirder and weirder. So it's amazing that this humble little $3 game, which is made out of these like copycat Castlevania sprites, has this staying power. Because every time this new update comes out, I'm just like, oh, there's like not necessarily just new weapons and power-ups. There's like more quests to undertake. And on top of that, it's just fun to play in general. Even without all this meta stuff, I think I'd still be super into it.
Cool. Well, I mean, it sounds like, and I don't remember you mentioning any of this stuff. I knew that there was an upgrade system, but it sounds like it's much more, a little grander in scale than maybe I was led to believe it would be.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I had the same sort of discovery process. I was like, oh, there's way more going on in this game than I had any idea about.
Cool. That's fun.
But anyway, so this brings me to 20 minutes till dawn, which is another Vampire Survivors like. It's a little more towards being a traditional twin stick shooter. In fact, yeah, it pretty much is just a twin stick shooter. That was actually one of the most jarring things getting into it, is that I realized like, oh, you actually have to like aim and fire your gun in this, as opposed to just being able to chill out and steer your guy around the screen. So I don't know if that's a huge distinction for people, but it is just we're back to the twin stick model at this point. And unlike Vampire Survivors, where you're just picking up all these different weapons and they kind of layer onto each other and form these ridiculous combinations of things, it's really all about just this one gun that you have. And there are a few different options that you can pick when you start out, and you have to unlock some of these initially, but eventually you'll have like your standard revolver, or you could get a shotgun or like a grenade launcher, all the sort of like archetypal guns that you run into in a video game. But beyond that, the premise is very similar, where you're just dumped onto this field and you've got your gun, and then suddenly these little enemies start pouring in from the sides of the screen. And you just gotta shoot all of them, and they drop little experience gems that you pick up and use to level up. And whenever you gain a level, you earn little upgrades like you do in Vampire Survivors. So the fact that this revolves around the gun you've got makes it very different. And that's so you're not just auto-attacking. Each gun, it like works as you have like clips. So you have to be kind of conscious about how many bullets you've got left in the clip before you have to reload, because that takes a little bit of time. Meanwhile, these enemies are still sort of like approaching you. And it's kind of cool because you have your normal movement speed, but as you are firing, you kind of have to like slow down a little bit. So again, it's not quite like in Vampire Survivors where you're just running around in like a breakneck pace trying to escape from these things. But you have to be a little more tactical about how you're moving and like when you decide to shoot at stuff, because that's going to like hamper your movement a little bit. Which I thought was interesting because, on some level, Vampire Survivors does feel just kind of mindless, where, you're just steering your cloud of bullets away from the largest group of enemies. But in 20 Minutes Till Dawn, you have to think a little bit more about sort of which enemies you're attacking and, when is the best opportunity to attack them. Like, when is it not going to get you in trouble if you're bogged down by shooting for a little bit. But beyond that, it feels very much it feels very similar to Vampire Survivors, nevertheless, because you do the same kind of like circling around enemies and shooting at them as they're pursuing you, more or less. And then you kind of have to circle back around to pick up the experience gems that they're dropping. But that's usually more difficult than it seems, because you have to avoid the whole cloud of them following you. So you end up doing these weird snaking sort of circles around them, like kind of trying to lead them away from the gems. So they're far enough away so you can go back in and safely retrieve them and level up. Because if all you're doing is shooting at them as you run away, you're just never going to pick up the experience gems, which is it's going to be a problem as more and more enemies start pouring in. You don't have any upgrades.
Right, so you have to sort of build kind of backtracking into your strategy to be able to upgrade.
Yeah. It becomes second nature once you start playing this, but it's just very weird starting out and realizing like, somehow I've got to get into where all these enemies are coming from so I can get the experience. But it's a little counterintuitive.
So it sounds like it scratches sort of a very similar itch to Vampire Survivors, but it has a slightly different approach.
Yeah, I think it's like just different enough that it's, I'm having a good time with it. I mean, I'm such a huge fan of the weapon evolution in Vampire Survivors, though. I was like, that's what I kind of look for now when I start one of these. And this doesn't have exactly the same system, but it does have something similar where you pick up these items, or you pick up these upgrades for your gun. And like I said, since you only have this gun, a lot of the upgrades are like very directly go into how your gun performs. The upgrade, the like fire rate, or the number of bullets you have in your clip, or how quickly you reload, and that sort of stuff. But you realize that there are these categories of sort of these upgrades. So if you get like the one that increases your reload speed, that unlocks a second tier of upgrades that you can run into, and then that further unlocks the third tier, which is like the ultimate form of that power up. So it's interesting. You have kind of these branching upgrades, and then there's this next level thing called synergies, where if you pick up specific combinations of these upgrades, you get like an even fancier sort of upgrade. So that's probably the closest thing to the evolution system they have in this. Still not exactly the same thing, but it's just an interesting alternative take.
Do you think that it seems like these came out sort of pretty close together? Do you think there's just a happy accident that they were kind of being simultaneously developed and almost sort of simultaneously released, or does 20 Minutes Till Dawn feel very sort of inspired by Vampire Survivors?
I'd have to check the dates on this. I think this came out several months after. Like I don't know how long it takes to develop a game like this.
Yeah.
It seems like fairly simple, but I suppose it's possible that somebody saw Vampire Survivors and just immediately thought, oh, I have an idea that's very similar to this that I could probably churn out in a few months.
Mm-hmm.
Or who knows, maybe it was in development the whole time, but it does have just a lot of sort of eerie similarities to Vampire Survivors for me to say that it wasn't a complete accident that this came out.
Yeah. I mean, this type of game is not new, right? I mean, you said you referenced Bullet Hell, but my brain, whenever I sort of see this in action, I think of Robotron.
Oh, yeah.
It looks like, which is, not a new game by any stretch.
Sure.
But is a very similar sort of template, I think, that you can kind of build on. So it's just interesting that there's sort of a resurgence in this, maybe a little potentially outdated formula for how to make a video game.
Mm-hmm. Well, so the twin stick element of it is definitely not new. But the fact that, you're just getting sworn by enemies, that feels like it definitely came from Vampire Survivors.
Yeah. That wasn't the case in Robotron. You kind of like one slow-moving robot on top of another.
Yeah. You're just kind of like, it's like any other game where you're just out to shoot whatever that moves.
Yeah.
But in this case, and in the Vampire Survivors case, everything is moving towards the center of the screen where you are. So it's a slightly different dynamic. So anyway, like I was saying, you get all these upgrades. You can select a different gun at the start of each run. You have a whole bunch of different characters you can unlock that perform slightly different. Like some of them have more health. Some of them will, shoot an extra bonus shot every few times you fire or something like that. In general, it feels like the way, depending on how you upgrade your character in Vampire Survivors, the sort of way you end up playing the game could be very different than somebody who upgraded their character in a completely different direction. In 20 Minutes Till Dawn, it feels like, for the most part, you're just shooting this gun. And certainly your choice of gun can make a difference, but a lot of the upgrades, it feels like you don't stray too far from the sort of core gameplay of just firing and reloading, which is fine because that's very entertaining. But it feels much closer to a typical twin stick shooter where you're just becoming incrementally more powerful as you play.
Right.
It's not like you pick up a certain power up and suddenly the entire game has changed, like potentially could in Vampire Survivors. That being said, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm still enjoying this quite a bit.
So in Vampire Survivors, if you're hunting down and sort of achieving these evolutions, do you then get to keep that weapon for future playthroughs, or is it sort of a one and done kind of scenario?
Well, you can unlock certain weapons. You don't get to start with the evolutions on subsequent playthroughs. You just have to go through the process again. You just have to track down that same weapon and artifact and be like, okay, this time I'm going to try and get enough levels into this that I can evolve it again, because that was great the last time.
Gotcha.
And it's very similar in this, where everything resets after you die. Which, by the way, this game, it feels much more difficult than Vampire Survivors. I don't know if that's like a good or a bad thing. But it did catch me off guard a little bit, because like Vampire Survivors, I can fairly reliably get through an entire run, which is like 30 minutes. Sometimes it gets very harrowing towards the end. And I've had a lot of runs go bad in like the 29th minute. But generally I'm not even mad about it, because it's such a rush getting to that point. And it's, there's always kind of a question like, okay, I'm super powerful, but is that going to be enough? Because there are just so many enemies swarming me. But so in 20 Minutes Till Dawn, I don't know what the deal is. I think I've only completed 1 or 2 games after playing it for quite a while, which is fine. But I'm just, coming off that Vampire Survivors high of, making it to the end, like more often than not. But it does have that effect of like, oh, I was so close. I'm just going to, give it one more go, and we'll see if things go differently this time. I'm not sure if this has sort of the overarching, like, sort of weird side quests that you can do. That may just be a thing that's unique to Vampire Survivors. But again, that's fine. I think this works perfectly well as a fun survival sort of twin stick shooter.
Right. Cool. And these are both are they both early access and both on PC?
Still in early access, yes. So I'm keeping that streak alive, just seeing how many early access games I can get through.
After 10 years of playing none.
Yeah, really. I want to say that there's a huge variety in the number of weapons and characters you can unlock and all these different playstyles, but I've generally just been sticking to the shotgun because I like that sort of rhythm to it. A lot of the other guns that I tried, I check one out and I go, oh, I'm definitely not enjoying this anywhere near as much as just that, tried and true shotgun. So I'll just go back to that in the next round. But I feel like, there's a different style for everybody. Maybe you're like a submachine gun type of person. Maybe you prefer a grenade launcher or something like that.
I do like a good shotgun in a video game.
Yeah. It's funny because I feel like I'm not generally... I mean, I guess it depends on the type of game. A lot of the time when I think of shooting in a video game, it's like a first-person shooter. And then I think I definitely don't like a shotgun in that situation. But in this one, it's just 2D, like a top-down kind of deal. And a shotgun behaves very differently. But, I don't know. So far, it's been working out pretty well.
Cool. Sounds like a good time. I don't know if I would like this. I'm intrigued by this. And certainly I dig the sort of the, skeletons. I like the aesthetic, but...
Yeah, it's kind of creepy. I mean, it's cute and cartoony.
It's cartoony creepy
way. Yeah. All the enemies are these weird little squid monsters or something.
Yeah. In general, the whole roguelike structure doesn't do it for me in video games until the 2 or 3 games where it does, and I'm super into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, for $3, it's hard not to want to experiment at least, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really think of this as a roguelike as much as other games I've played.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it is, a roguelike or whatever, because you're just picking up upgrades the whole time. But
then you lose them.
Yeah, you do. But it's just like playing any arcade game, like back in the day, or even like Geometry Wars. I guess you wouldn't really upgrade yourself in that game.
Oh, that was the game that you sort of referred to it as. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like Robotron, right?
Right. That's true.
And even if you weren't upgrading yourself in that game, it's just a matter of, how long can I survive in this game, or how high of a score can I rack up before I'm eventually overwhelmed by all these enemies. But it's not like, I don't know. When I think of roguelikes, I think of something like, Spelunky or FTL. I mean, on some level, those are just arcade games also.
Right. That's a very sort of arcadey structure.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Sounds like fun.
Yeah, I mean, I'm having a good time with it. Certainly more than that weird spaceship game I played a couple of weeks ago. But, again, so early access developers seems to be also updating this fairly regularly. I think it's like, one of the first updates just came out, so we'll see if that keeps up.
Cool. So it's Vampire Survivors, and what's the other one called?
20 Minutes Till Dawn.
Cool.
Titled because so initially each run lasts 20 minutes, so you need to survive for 20 minutes. But also there's just like this accelerated mode, which only lasts 10 minutes, and you gain experience twice as quickly. So I just been playing that, and it's, I don't know, for some reason I'm just like, why would I want to play this thing that just takes twice as long?
All right, cool. Well, sounds like a good time. Let's wrap this episode up, I guess. If you need any more video game hangover in your brain, you should follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/VGHangover. And you can always get show notes and links and tell us what you thought about this episode at VGHangover.com. We would love for you to join us on Discord, hang out with us, chat about video games and other fun stuff. You can get a link to that at VGHangover.com. And we would love for you to subscribe, rate, and review us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Music, and anywhere else you can get a podcast. And help us out. Do the big work. Tell your friends about the show. That's the big work.
Yeah, that helps us a lot. That's one of the few ways that people discover the show, because we don't do a lot of like other advertising or anything. So we actually rely quite a bit on word of mouth. It's great if you could help us out and just pass along a recommendation to your buddy who likes vampire games. Or Star Wars games. One of those two things.
Right.
Or games where you're just eaten by an enormous fish.
We cover all the video game hangover bases.
Is that it? Yeah, that covers everything, right?
Yep. Anyway,
we want to give thanks again to Saria Lemes this week for our intro and outro music. Please go over to pettypanol.bandcamp.com. Check out more of our stuff. Maybe buy every album that you see there.
Yeah. We'll be back next week. Until then, this is Randy Dickinson.
This is DJ Ross.
Thanks so much for listening to Video Game Hangover. Goodbye.
Good night.
See ya.